If you liked this episode of the Hockey IQ podcast, please leave a like, a comment, and especially review our podcast. If you truly listened all the way to the end and you're listening to this right now, you enjoyed this episode. Please go and give it a 5-star review. That helps us out more than you know. Thank you so much and look forward to the next one. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we bring on Shaun Goodsell or Goodsell. What is it?
Goodsell, yeah.
Goodsell. Um, Basically the best performance coach out there ever. Really excited to have you on, Shaun.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having me. And I don't know that I'm the best out there, but I certainly try my hardest to be the best.
You're on my Mount Rushmore with like Greg Harden and the other folks that are quite amazing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words.
So let's start our conversation with the big elephant in the room. And by big elephant, I mean the big sign on the wall behind you, which is the man in the arena.
Yeah,
Why is that the thing that you decided to hang on your wall?
man, you do start with big ammo. It almost brings tears to my eyes. Through the course of my career of working with what I would think are the way I think of athletes that are, pursuing their dreams, is I think of those people as heroes because you get dirty and you get beat up and you get criticized and you get a lot of doubts come your way, and it's those people that are in the arena that keep pursuing, keep moving forward, keep digging, that I have such respect for, whether they're athletes that are pursuing their athletic dreams or coaches pursuing their dreams or parents wanting to help their kids or business people trying to do something productive. I just think there's no way to stay clean and stay out of the arena. And so that's why it's on there, because I just want to always honor people who are courageous enough to go pursue their highest, dreams for life.
Well, part of that and having the courageousness to do that comes down to a lot of self-confidence, which for me comes down to a lot of like self-talk and like how do you talk to yourself because your thoughts eventually become action and become what you do, but also can be powerful with maybe how you label yourself or what you think you are capable and what you're not. Um, Curious what your thoughts are. Like for me, a lot of things in mental performance and training come down to self-talk, but I'm not the expert. Curious your thoughts.
Well, self-talk is certainly a skill that either inhibits or enhances the pursuit of our dreams and goals. Certainly, there are other things that are really important, but I think a lot of people are not even aware of the nature of their self-talk. And so I would agree that self-talk becomes a very important skill to work on, but it's a lot easier. In my mind, it's a lot easier to identify your self-talk than it is to change your self-talk. And so I believe that setting intentions and helping people take steps in the direction of improving how they talk to themselves, how they perceive what's going on in their lives, how they frame struggle and discouragement and disappointment. Uh, when you learn how to do those things, then self-talk becomes part of the process of moving the ball down the field in terms of getting better at how you interact with the things in your life.
Well, I always tell people, I'm like, who's the person you talk to the most? Yourself.
Yeah,
Probably should be nice to them. Would you be around a friend who did not talk nice to you all the time? Okay, maybe
yeah,
we start with ourselves. And I'm curious, you named one thing about like framing as kind of an idea. So like framing struggle is the word that you used, but it
yeah.
just seems like a mental framing. Like when I think about this, it's almost creating one, the awareness, and then two, through the awareness, creating a pause where we can
Hmm.
redirect our mental state. Like I used to say, "Oh, sorry," when I like ran into someone, and I'm like, "Pardon me." And for whatever reason, it's like a good mental frame shift for me of like, "Oh, okay, we're not getting aggressive here." I'm like, "Oh, pardon, this is my fault." Not like sorry, like what are we doing here? And just changing these little things slightly, and then over time it adds up more and more. So I'm curious about like reframing, how do we go about improving these things? It's like you said, it's easy to identify. Um, you know, how many people are able to identify that, maybe I'm not feeling that great today, but how do we go about actually changing it is a whole nother ball game.
So I'll give you an interesting framework that I use just about every day with somebody, and that is most most people that are mentally struggling have what I call an all or nothing framework. They either, you ask them, how did you play today? I either played great or I was terrible. Or in some cases, they might even say I played okay. And when I ask them again, how did you play today? And they judge how they played. They make a judgment about whether they played okay or played good or they played bad. And I said, let's try on a new framework. Instead of judging how you played, describe to me how you played. And they'll go, well, they are almost addicted. People are almost addicted to the polarity of good and bad. I said, just describe it. Well, I played with intensity. I played quick. Had a stick on puck was good. If you're a goalie, my angles were good. My depth was where I wanted it to be. Now you're describing your play without judging your play. And when you describe to yourself how you played, you have a tendency to stay more emotionally stable than if you judge how you play. And so one of the frames that I honestly teach just about every day is this transition from let's quit judging it to let's just describe it. And just about every athlete that I've taught that to has told me that that change in framework was a game changer for them.
That reminds me of Ted Lasso. Um, it's don't be judgmental, be curious.
Yeah,
And that kind of same idea of like, okay, that's a great thing to do to others if you don't understand something, because everything makes sense if you look close enough. The further you go
absolutely.
back, maybe it doesn't make sense in the grand scheme of things, but to that person, that clearly makes sense. That's why they did that. That's why they thought that way. But what is the framework we're looking into? How close are we looking? How far are we looking? And if you have like a disagreement, most of the time it's just because we're looking at 100-foot view versus 1,000-foot view. Um, it's amazing what happens when you stop judging others and yourself.
Well, and another framework that I use around the judgment factor is let's deconstruct to reconstruct. So most people find it difficult to make significant changes that are sustainable over time. So let's deconstruct it into small pieces so that we can create momentum because momentum is the one of the greatest single factors that lead to people being able to create sustainable change in areas of their life that they find problematic. If you try to make too big of a change too fast, you might be successful for 2 or 3 days, but you're not going to make it a part of your lifestyle unless you deconstruct it on a small enough scale to reconstruct it on a bigger scale.
All right. So what is it? Baby steps, bite-sized bits, 1 foot in front of the other.
Yeah. How do you eat the elephant one step at a time? Those kinds of things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
but having a mantra even where you say to yourself when you're trying to break down a game or break down a challenge or deal with something, let's deconstruct it. Let's figure out really what's going on so that we can reconstruct a plan that is a little bit more optimal than the one that you're in right now. And that's again been another framework that has been repetitive in my coaching is just helping people think differently about their challenges.
So as a performance coach, I'm curious from how do you start identifying the areas and the items? Obviously, that one is just have a conversation, but I'm assuming we've got some good ways to figure out maybe areas of attack or ways of thinking. Um, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
So in my first 5 years of practicing, I would just carry on an interview. And what I was trying to identify was uh, what were the roadblocks to this person's ability to reach their goals. But then I, 5 years in, said, I bet there are some assessments that other sports psychologists had been using to break that down in a more objective fashion and then present it back to the athlete for the sake of discussion to identify areas of vulnerability. So a number of years ago, I came across an assessment called the TACE assessment, and it stands for the Attitudinal and Interpersonal Style Inventory. It was developed by a sports psychologist named Robert Niedenfuhr, and I was one of the few people. I'm one of the few people in I think the U.S. that actually has the rights to use that assessment and this is usually for athletes 13 and above in terms of their ability to take the assessment, understand the terminology in it. And it gives me a whole printout of what's this person's confidence level, what's this person's level of distractibility, what's their awareness level, what's their, uh, what are some of their challenges around how they think? Do they think too broad? Do they think too narrow? Are they risk takers? Are they not risk takers? And it gives me a whole assessment with narrative about them. And it's a nice talking point, a nice starting point to be able to really identify what's the personalized form of framing that this person has and person uses in their life to deal with struggle athletically. And you can even compare, I can even compare them to Olympic hockey players. I can compare them to world champions. I can compare them to other athletes in their sport because there's a large enough database where now they can do that. So when I got that, and when I got the rights to do that and got trained in being able to interpret those, my level of clarity about how to help athletes skyrocketed. So that's what I use now is I use that tool to really save myself about 4 sessions because I can do that. Someone can take that profile, I can interpret it in about a half an hour.
What is the first thing that your eyes go to when you're looking at one of those assessments?
The athlete's level of distractibility. How able are they to be able to focus their attention, concentrate their attention without distraction?
Why is that important?
Because performance and the ability to play in a emotional and mental state is is very, very correlated and connected to one's ability to stay focused for a period of time at the task at hand.
Reminds me of my definition of mental strength, which is the ability to focus on the next most important thing,
Yeah,
which is probably stealing it from John Wooden because he's the greatest at these great quotes.
I love John Wooden.
Not sure where that came from, but I absolutely love it. So distractibility seems like it would be increasing in today's society with smartphones and how quickly we can access things, how frustrating it can get. It used to be you'd have to wait on your internet to go through the phone line, and
Right,
loading an internet page could take a minute, literally a minute. Um, Now if it doesn't load in zero point 0.2 seconds, you're like, oh my God, this is so slow.
right,
Uh, Curious what you've seen through years of practice, literally going through the internet age
right.
from when you started to where you are now.
Well, so when you think about distraction, think about external distractibility, your environment and the distractions that are in your environment, and then internal distractibility, which is the self-talk and the dialogue, and how connected is that to the goals that you have and to the ability to stay focused on the task at hand. Certainly, from an external distractibility perspective, we have trained, if you get into the neuropsychology of this, which I'm not an expert, but I have enough understanding of it to know that the more that you put dopamine into your body and the more that you use devices and apps to excite your brain to release dopamine, the more uh, the more difficult it is to stay focused and concentrated because your brain is constantly looking for a new form of stimulation. And so it's not the smartphone that's the challenge, it's the apps on the smartphone that are the challenge. Because when the iPhone came out, all it did was uh, have a better way to text, give calls, give visual voicemails, and put music. Remember, it was music that people wanted on their phones. It wasn't Instagram and TikTok and all these other things. So as these apps became more uh, enticing and produced more dopamine in the brain, people became more addicted to it. So now these companies that produce these apps get paid not by how many people look at it, but how long they look at it. And that's the problem right now with our young generation is that they are literally addicted to certain apps that can give a continual form of stimulation that trains their brain to be very ineffective in being able to focus and concentrate.
How do we get away from distractibility? I'm thinking external, we can all kind of get an idea of that.
Yeah.
Internal, I think, is really what captivates me. And what does that look like? Assuming there's probably a detox from the tech itself, but then there's also got to be more to that.
Well, the digital detox part of it is something that's important. But beyond that, I think that what I've found with the people that I've tried to work with to try to help them improve their uh, level of internal distractibility is I think there's a lot of power in journaling and obviously meditation and breath work and things like that are also very important. But journaling uh, puts puts it on paper. It allows you to dump whatever's going on in your brain on a piece of paper and allows you to evaluate it third person. And so when you're looking at something third person versus first person, you're able to see some of uh, the challenges or the viruses in the way you're thinking, and then you can actually, when you do it consistently enough, you can see patterns emerge that you want to interrupt, and then you can use journaling to interrupt those patterns. But to reframe or to retrain a person's inner dialogue and inner distractibility uh, is not problematic, but it takes time and it takes a level of discipline on the individual's part to practice it and do it consistently. Otherwise, it's too easy to go back to the default mechanism that a lot of people have.
So I've got a bigger piece of this, kind of like zooming out slightly,
Sure.
which is like knowing is one thing, but
Yeah.
actually being able to apply something is a whole nother thing. If most people know X, Y, and Z, but then going and changing could be a million different things. But I'm just thinking about knowing and then actually doing are two
Yeah.
very separate things. And the people that I've seen to have people I've seen that have an ability to close the gap between those two are the ones that seem to have more success, a little bit happier, etc.
Yeah.
Curious your thoughts.
Well, they used to talk about, I tell a lot of my athletes, I say, knowing something is only valuable if you act on it. Just having knowledge about something does nothing for you. It's like it just takes up cognitive space in your brain. But if you act on it and you know it, there's an old saying in neuropsychology that says neurons that fire together wire together. And all that means is that if you have an intention and you tie an action to an intention, then those neurons fire and wire together and creates the possibility of creating a habit. So I always, when I work with my athletes, I don't care how big of a step they take towards an idea that they want to act on. I just care that they take a consistent step. So if I say I want you to get up in the morning and I want you to set an intention for the day and I want you to write it down and then I want you to tie one behavior that day to that intention, I don't care how small it is, I don't care how minimal it is, I don't care how long it takes. All I care is that there's an intention that you set and that there's a behavior that you've tied to that intention and that you 100% commit to doing that daily. And because I know that's the only way there's going to be a residue of long-term sustainability and success. and you'll appreciate this analogy. Every hockey player that plays hockey knows that when you put on a pair of hockey gloves during the year and you take your hockey gloves off after practice and you smell your hands, it smells like your hockey gloves. And I always tell my athletes, I want the stuff we're talking about to stay on you like the smell does of your hockey gloves. And so that's my analogy that I use is, do you smell today when they get on a call with me? Did anything last from our call? Did you do anything in alignment with your intention and your action, or did you not?
Uh, hockey hands. If you've played hockey, you know exactly this. This is super vibrant in
Yes,
our heads right now.
and I was a goalie, so I even understand it because I had different kinds of gloves, but every hockey player knows what their hands smell like after they played hockey. And that's what with your mind, I want your mind to have a residue that tells you that you did more than just learn something, that you acted on it in some way.
All right, my notes here. I've got to put this in. Mental hockey hands. That's the
Mm-hmm.
goal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Emotional and mental hockey hands.
yeah, I'm stealing that one. That
You can put
or
that
you,
in your newsletter if you want.
yeah, or you and me are gonna trademark that one. That one's good.
Yeah.
I love that. So we talk a lot about like personal stuff. I'm curious as we kind of go towards the team aspect of this. And as a coach myself, I feel like I've got a good insight to what us coaches are trying to accomplish. At least the ones that are trying to do more than just win today
Yeah.
and win in life and longer. A lot of it is around fostering leadership and developing leaders.
Mm-hmm.
How can folks like myself get better at that? Because it's the ultimate. Um, Also, like player development hack. Like the better your players become as people and the better they mature, it directly is going into the game and their performance there. And is another reason why we shouldn't be just coaching for today and winning at the scoreboard, but coaching for life and winning long term. It will help both.
Yeah. So and that's another one of my passions is trying to help coaches build and develop leaders through their ability to influence their team as coaches. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert at this, but I think I have some pretty good ideas about how to do this because I actually worked with adolescents and teenagers for the better part of 30 years of my life. Like it doesn't take me long to understand what's going on with a young person. And I've talked with a lot of players about this concept of leadership. And to the best of my ability today, I'll explain what I've learned up to this point. And first thing is that in order for leaders to emerge within a team concept, I think it's a coach has to be clear about what the values are of the team. You can't find leaders unless you define and are clear about what does it mean? What are we playing for here? What type of culture are we after? If that's not clear, then your leaders will not show up because they won't trust that what they're leading in terms of a set of objectives are clear enough. Because the worst thing that a student leader fears is stepping out in vulnerability and being looked at as kind of stupid. And I see a lot of coaches ask me, Shaun, how do I build leaders on my team? And the first thing I ask them is, well, are you clear about what kind of culture you're trying to create? Have you communicated that? Like, is it okay during practice for a player to, you know, take shortcuts in a drill? Is it because they're the ta most talented player on the team, do they get away with things that other players don't? Um, is it okay for another player on a team to call out one of their teammates because if those things aren't established and the emotional safety of the group isn't created, then nobody will lead because they're afraid that their sense of belonging will be compromised. Secondly, I encourage coaches to create a job description for what it means to be a leader on our team. If you want to lead on our team, here is what we're looking for. Just like if you were going to apply for a job somewhere. And And if you're serious about leadership, then I would actually hold interviews for people to say, hey, this is the job description. Come and interview for this job and tell us why you think you'd be a good fit for this. And then if you have 3 or 4 candidates that come forward that you think are pretty good, then interview them in front of the team and let them make their case to their teammates. Because in any other part where leadership is appreciated, you have to know what it means to be a leader and you have to interview for it. And you have to convince and influence the people that you want to lead that you should be the one leading them or you should be a part of a team leading them. And then the next last part, I think if you choose a group of leaders, then you're as a coach, you owe it to them to develop them, to train them, to give them opportunities to lead and then give them feedback on how they're doing. Because there's no other there's no other role in leadership where you're not being evaluated. You're being evaluated every day. And if your communication skills are poor, then you should upgrade your communication skills. If your ability to build rapport with your teammates is poor, then you should learn how to do that. If you don't have the emotional and inner strength to speak and do what you need to do, then you should be challenged to grow that. Uh, so those are some thoughts I have about leadership and mentoring.
So the first thing of many that I want to pull out of that
Mhm.
was around creating emotional safety. I feel like that's kind of the baseline framework that we need to have in place as leaders, as people looking over young developing people, just in any general, is creating a little bit of emotional safety to be able to for me, it goes to and I'm curious what other people think on this one too. So feel free to comment and share uh, around like the relationship with failure. I coach high school hockey, so a lot of the kids want to be cool around their friends, and it's always I feel like my job to help them have a better relationship with failure, and it's okay to fail. We want to see people trying. It's a problem if you're not trying and creating that emotional safety of it's okay to fail, it's okay to try, and just getting these repetitions of doing these things. So that's the first thing I want to pull out is just around emotional safety.
So when I think of emotional safety, there's two ways I think about it. I think of emotional safety between player and coach, and I think about emotional safety between player and player. And I think as a coach, one of the most players have some degree of failure or fear of failure. They don't want to fail. And I've often wondered if like a high school coach would take me on as part of their staff that I could be like, I wouldn't want to like set the starting lineup and I wouldn't want to be the player development person, but I'd like to be like the person that was curating the culture. And one of the things that I would tell the coach is, I want you to develop kind of a dialogue with every one of your players, and I want you to tell them what type of failure you expect them to embrace this week. Like some players need to slow down because they're too fast and they're skating right past their opportunities. Some players are too slow. They need to up their energy level. Some players are getting rid of the puck too fast. Some people are getting rid of the puck too slow. So you have to frame the type of failure that you want your players to engage in because the emotional safety isn't about the failure. It's about how well you know the individual player and how to help them fail in a productive way. And then when it comes to like player to player, one of the ideas that I worked with this on a college hockey team, and I said, I want you to create a note card for every player about what you want them to work on this week in practice or what's going to help them, gain greater opportunities on the team. And I want you to make it look really nice, like put the team name on it, put their number on it, make it so it's laminated so you can write on it and re-erase it. I want you to put it on their locker stall with what they need to work on. And then I want you to, at the beginning of every week, I want you to go around the locker room and talk about each player and what you need them to work on. And the reason you do it amongst the whole team is because the team needs to know that person A is working on this, person B is working on this, and they need each other to help each other out. Because I think a lot of times, players to players, the safety is not there because they don't see the need that they have for each other. But if person A is working on forechecking harder and person B is working on hanging onto the puck a little longer, and during practice they have a scuffle together and they know that it's a productive scuffle, that one person wasn't just trying to show the other one up. One is trying to work on their thing when the other is trying to work on their thing. Now you create a mutual dependency amongst the team on each other to grow their skills. And the coach set the stage for it to happen. They didn't make it happen.
I really like that piece about everyone knowing that they have something to work on and the fact that we're all working and failing. And the idea of like, how do we fail in a productive way and not saying like, oh, so and so threw a puck and it got intercepted and oh, I'm losing my mind because of another player, rather than maybe that player's working on playmaking and
Right,
throwing area passes.
right.
And really, it's a productive way for them to get better and something that we should be supporting. Like, oh, that was a great thought you had. Keep doing
Well,
that.
and when you think, Greg, about coaching, one of the things that I talk to athletes a lot about mentally is distinguishing the difference between a mistake of execution and a mistake of judgment. Because sometimes they had great judgment, they just didn't execute. And sometimes they had great execution, but poor judgment. And so that's why I talk about failing productively, because just going out there and saying, I'm going to fail doesn't mean that there was any growth that occurred from that failure unless there's a frame put around it to help the athlete understand how to adapt and how to change in order to make a better play. And that's why I like to distinguish the difference between a mistake of execution and a mistake of judgment.
I like this. It kind of gets me to my favorite question in hockey, which is what did you see? Or my favorite command, which is walk me through that.
Yeah.
So you can understand where is the actual issue. Because so many people look at the execution, did it work, did it not? And that's their judgment. And I'm going to correct based on that rather than maybe it wasn't so much about the execution, but oh, I didn't even see it. Well, okay, now we need to get our head up. Or I was looking at this and it's like maybe we should be focusing on these key areas instead of these areas, and being able to redirect and help that person to that next level. Um, and then figure out exactly what they need. Do we need work on what we'll say, quote unquote, the skills drills where we're going around a cone working on a very technical piece? Or is it more so we need maybe more small area games or small sided games where we're getting reps at looking at the environment? Which I find the environment's usually the answer there. They need more looks at that rather than the actual like skills drills where we're going around a cone.
And then the last thing is you also have to think situationally. You know, if you're down by 2 goals with 5 minutes left in the game and a person throws an area pass up the middle of the ice because if they hit it, there's one of their teammates going on a breakaway, or it gets picked off at center ice and the other team goes in an odd man rush. It's like, oh my gosh, that wasn't necessarily a mistake of execution or judgment. It was just situational. We had to take a risk and it didn't work. And players, honestly, they don't, a lot of them don't have the capacity to break it down in the way that we're talking about. So they just think they suck because they made a mistake. And the self-talk that comes now isn't refined enough to say, no, you know, your awareness just needs to broaden periodically, or your awareness needs to narrow more often. When you're in the corner trying to win a puck battle, you can't have a broad and external form of awareness. You got to have a narrow and specific form of awareness. When the game is in the first period, in the 5 minutes into the first period, we want to develop some momentum by executing fundamentals. We don't need to be throwing, long passes in the first period. But players do not have the refinement of a coach's mindset. That's why I think coaches build safety with their players by teaching them how to think the game the way they do.
I can see the passion is rising in Shaun, and I love it.
Well, because I've just had so many players who have so many, they want to please their coaches. I mean, I don't know if coaches understand how much their players want to please their coaches, and they're so afraid of disappointing them. And when they do something that they know wasn't in alignment with the game plan or what they wanted, they really feel discouraged that they disappointed their coach. And I think coaches could increase the athletes' resiliency around mistakes if they could give them a framework for how to think differently about their mistakes.
That is a beautiful segue to where I wanted to go next, which is around relationship with, yes, we've been talking a lot about coaching and coaches in this podcast,
Mhm.
but with parents, because I have a good feeling that no matter what the age, a child still wants approval from their parent.
Yeah, well, you can't get around that in hockey. There's lots of approval addicts. And unfortunately in our society, I think we train kids to look for approval from everywhere except from within. And in my early years and still today, I do a lot of parent training on helping parents understand how to psychologically prepare their kids and what role they play and what role they don't play in helping their kids succeed within, in this case, the sport of hockey. So I'm sure there are some follow-up questions you might have around, okay, now if you have that going on, what do you do? How do you handle or how do you talk to parents about this in a relevant way?
Well, I mean, you already asked two questions to yourself, so I guess we should probably start there, which is what role do parents play? What role don't they play?
Well, in youth hockey, I mean, I think depending on what community you're in, I think coaches or parents are set up to be parent coaches a lot to their kids. And I guess one of the things I would say is if I could do anything to stay away from parents coaching their kids, I would do it. And people ask me this all the time. Well, why is it so bad that a parent is a coach? And the easiest answer is because there are many people that are going to play coaching roles in most young people's journey in hockey, but they only get one parent. And to be an effective coach of your kid and still be their parent, I I've been doing this work a long time and I've still never met a parent that could pull it off. That they could actually be a great coach and not lose their standing as a parent. And I always tell them, I go, your kids can't afford to lose you as a dad or a dad or a mom, but they can afford to lose you as a coach. And so I'm a big believer in parents playing the role of support, cheerleaders. That's it. I don't believe that parents should be coaching their kids. I don't believe parents should get in the car and talk about the kids' game after the game. I don't believe that they should push their kids to get out in the garage and shoot pucks. I believe that parents have a significant role of influence, but if they mismanage it, it can be very destructive to the kid.
Have you seen the Jeff Daniels clip?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to give you homework, and along with all the listeners on the podcast, homework
Okay.
is go look at the Jeff Daniels clip on him as a hockey parent.
Okay.
And I'm going to try to find this really quick on Twitter, I guess now X. So I know I've posted this before. Um, it was pretty sure it's Jeff Daniels. That's the actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's Jeff Daniels, and he was talking about his journey and relationship with his kids nowadays. And one of the things he does is to actually go around and play like musical events with them. And that relationship now as an adult, he talks about the enhancement of that due to how he handled his parent relationship as they were going around playing hockey,
Hmm.
and the powerful impacts he believed that that had of getting in the car and not talking about hockey. Like talk about anything other than hockey. Like if the kid wants to go there, sure. But more importantly, it was about just fostering a relationship, being supportive, being that parent that a lot of times it's just listening, but sometimes, helping out with that little correction. Maybe we can think about this better, and asking great questions and just having good conversations and understanding this is going to be a lifelong thing. And I'm not trying to be super intense at this very moment all the time.
One thing that has always made me really sad in my practice is when a kid, usually they're getting ready to go to college or their later years in high school, will say to me something like this: Shaun, the only thing that my parents can talk to me about is my sport. And they don't know a thing about me outside of my sport. And that's all we ever talk about. And inevitably, as they go to college or finish up high school, their relationship virtually dies because once hockey is over, they don't have anything to talk about. And so a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, I developed the 90-day parenting challenge because I wanted to set in motion something practical that parents could use to take their energy and apply it differently. And I wrote 100 questions. So I wrote a book called The Difference Makers, and it was basically a book for parents to understand how to really make a difference in their kids' lives without being hockey or sports centric. I said, use these 100 questions in 90 days and pick a question or two questions that you want to curiously pursue with your kid and do it for 90 days and see how your relationship changes and evolves and transforms into something beautiful because you are becoming a more curious person about things about your kid that had nothing to do with them as an athlete. And I got lots of people who took me up on the 90-day parenting challenge and told me that that literally set in motion a whole new paradigm for how they related to their kid. And I'd be more than happy to share it with your listeners if you'd like. I think,
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And I just put in our chat as we're talking here. So if you go to the Hockey IQ newsletter, or if you just Google the car ride home from hockey, it will have that Jeff Daniels clip in it and maybe some 2 cents from yours truly. But I think it's a great impactful piece for those parents. And I would assume this would be 99.99999% to the extreme.
yeah,
Uh, Parents that would love to have a great relationship with their child for life.
yes. The greatest, in my opinion, now that I have kids that are adults, the greatest honor and the greatest compliment I think you can get as a parent is when your kids as adults want to hang out with you. They like being with you. They pursue you. They pursue you for wisdom. They pursue you for ideas. They pursue you because you've built a framework or you've built a foundation where they know that you already approve of them. Whether they do X or do Y, you already approve of them. Their sense of belonging with you isn't up for grabs.
The word I'm thinking of is just peace. Like there's that peace in the relationship, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, Next piece that I'd love to dive into and kind of pulls out from a lot of the things that we've talked about is having this greater self-awareness and focus. I know there's a big struggle, and we've all probably gone through it in some capacity as you age and you gain this greater self-awareness where it can sometimes be almost too much self-awareness where you're self-conscious about things that maybe we don't need to worry about as much, or a self-awareness that is a little too internal to ourselves, and it becomes a problem.
So are you kind of talking about what happens when we overinflate and take on messages within ourselves that become um, disturbing to our self-concept or come disturbing to us that we actually end up making up things that get in our way?
That could be something, or like this shows up in many different capacities. I think overthinking would be the oversimplification on this. Is like people get into this downward spiral of overthinking things too much, and kind of like paralyzes, or we're not trying as hard, or the classic example of I wasn't trying that hard. Like it's which is we all know is like an excuse that, you just don't want to be embarrassed if you try hard and fail.
Right. If you think about overthinking, a lot of people think overthinking is an abundance of thought or too much thought. Really, overthinking is the byproduct of a lack of clarity. So, if you want to ruin a person, if you want to ruin an athlete, just confuse them. Give them double messages, give them multiple messages, tell them that you want them to do multiple things that might conflict with each other, have a double standard. The reason athletes overthink is because they're not clear on what their pathway is to success. So, a lot of athletes will say to me, Shaun, I need to quit overthinking. I need to quit overanalyzing. I need to quit doing this. And I ask them, I go, well, what do you know for sure? Well, that's the problem, Shaun. I don't know what I know for sure. My coach wants this, my coach wants that. One coach wants me to do this, one coach wants me to do that. So when I get out on the ice and compete, I lack the inner clarity that I need to pour my full self and attention into something because I'm not sure on what I should be doing. And one time I was working with a coach and he was telling me that he had a couple of players that were super talented that were not playing intuitively. They weren't playing fast. And I said, well, how would you know if they were playing faster? Well, they'd be doing X, Y, and Z. And I go, have you told them that? Well, no. I said, well, that's why they're struggling because they are looking for feedback, which by the way is an important element of playing in a state of flow is immediate feedback. If they're not getting immediate feedback in order to make adaptations and adjustments in their play, that's why they're overthinking. They're not overthinking because they're Einstein out on the ice and they're looking for all the best options. They're overthinking because they're not clear about what you want them to do and what their role is on this team.
Clarity is key. Clarity is key. And
Clarity is
you,
more important than confidence. If you have confidence and no clarity, you're not in a good spot. But if you have clarity and you're trying to build your confidence, you're okay.
I would say clarity would lead a little bit towards confidence as well.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly.
so feedback is critical. What does good feedback look like? What kind of feedback should players, parents, coaches be looking for? Because there's, I would say, helpful feedback and maybe not so helpful feedback. And this is a rabbit hole we can go down for a long time. But what are
I,
the key elements for you?
well, to me, there in hockey, there are multiple levels of feedback, but when the feedback is coming from a person, a coach or a consultant or a parent, uh, the first thing that it should be is clear. If a lot of players will come to me and they'll have meetings with their coaches and I'll say, well, if your coach is giving you any feedback, well, they just want me to work harder. That's not feedback. That's a cop out as far as I'm concerned. So
Drives me up a wall.
yeah, it's a default mechanism I think a lot of coaches use because they don't know how to give quality feedback, so they just say that as a way of covering their rear end. But so John Wooden, as you mentioned earlier, was an expert at this. It was clear, it was concise, and it was specific. And he was known, he was actually researched one time. I read this in a study where the longest piece of feedback he gave his athletes was 20 seconds, and the shortest was 2 seconds. And it was all adaptive in nature. Try this, try that, try this, try that. It wasn't confrontive, it was adaptive. It was clear, concise, and adaptive to that individual and their role and how they could become more effective. And that's why I always think of feedback as either productive or unproductive. Your feedback either moves towards a greater clear goal or it confuses. And when feedback is confusing, it's unproductive. It's not bad feedback, it's just unproductive.
Nothing drives me up a wall faster than when a coach says we need to work harder. It is just so meaningless and useless. It's that's one of the first things I tell any new coach that I work with. I'm like, we are going to be specific in our feedback. Like, we are going to be specific in what we're asking for. Don't like a player just wants to know, what do I need to do better?
Right.
Like, that's the question they're asking themselves, whether it be their own performance or in the grand scheme of how do I work better with a team? Like, how do I get better? Like, everyone wants to be a little bit better than they were yesterday.
And they want to get consistent feedback. They don't want like don't give me feedback one day and then avoid me because I'm on the fourth line for the next 4 days. Show interest in my development like you do all the other players. Even though I may not be one of the more skilled players on the team, I still am part of this team and deserve to be given feedback about how I can improve my game because that's what keeps people engaged with the team is believing that they may not be as skilled, but they are as important. And they are as valuable of a teammate. And that's how coaches build emotional safety as well, as they don't show favoritism and give more feedback to the top players than they do the players that are maybe not as skilled.
If I had a dollar for every time I saw a coach not actually coach their top players, I think I could fund a lot of hockey programs.
Really?
It's amazing how almost like, I mean, obviously the top players are top players because they have the ability to execute and do things that need to be done. But I find that a lot of coaches almost focus too much on the bottom of the roster, or they focus too much on the top end of the roster, and sometimes the middle kind of gets forgotten, or they're focusing, like the way I put it is like, you're either trying to expand your best players further or you're trying to catch up the other ones to the best players, rather than maybe giving more equal weight and understanding of like, okay, everyone's important, what's the role, creating clarity and good feedback for them to have success in their own abilities where they are today. Like for me, that's what I always talk about with my players is, where are we today and what do we need to work on today? Um, you may have a different problem in the future, but like,
Yeah, this is
don't feel
today.
bad about like failing at something today because that's what you personally need. Like, well, I'll do skating stuff and I'll add pucks. So like, if something's really easy, I'm gonna add a puck.
Yeah,
If that's easy with one puck, I'm giving you two pucks.
right.
And so I'll have a skating drill where I'll have players with no pucks and I'll have players with two pucks.
Yeah,
And it's all based on where is your capability and what is the proper challenge that you need in your personal development. Which at first is kind of weird. And you'll see like players take pucks where it's like, you probably should take a puck, or like a player will knock it out of the ballpark. It's like, no, no, here's another one. And they like struggle to find like, where am I actually at today? And the simple things like that to help them figure it out. And then also the comfort of, I feel like constantly, and you mentioned it, consistency and feedback of like, what's okay, what's not. I probably can be better about actually writing all of these things out for the players rather than just talking about them all. But just, I know what I'm looking for, and I try to give the same message time and time again. Maybe not the exact same way, but putting a little spice on it to keep it fresh.
yeah. I think language, if you think about language is symbolic. And every time we use different words, diff players could hear the same word that we give one differently. So we got to be really aware of asking the players, what did you hear from me? I just gave you a message. Now feed back to me. What did you hear? What do you think I want from you? And that's the piece that I think separates really good coaches from master level coaches is being able to say to the player, now feed back to me what you heard. Because 1/3 of the time they're not going to hear what you wanted them to hear, and you can correct that before it becomes problematic when you ask for the feedback loop to be closed, if you will. And I always encourage coaches to try to stay away from good and bad in terms of language that they use because good and bad is polarizing. If you use descriptive language again as you coach, you stay away from the emotional ups and downs that can be curated because of polarizing language of good and bad. And when I work with players, and there are so many players that always want to say good and always want to say bad. That was a good play. That was a bad play. That was a good play. Stop it. I don't want to hear that language or that was right or that was wrong. This isn't hockey's not a moral game. Hockey is a game hockey is a game that is based on time and space. When you're on offense, you want to create time and space. When you're on defense, you want to reduce time and space. And and if you understand philosophically what you're trying to do, now you can talk about how to help players within the role that they have in a clear, concise way that give them the ability to then notice, and this is really important. Coaches always say, how do I increase the confidence with my players? If you want to increase the confidence of your players, give them clear messages about what you want them to do, then allow them to see when they did it well so that they can then give themselves the feedback that they did the job in the manner it was meant to be done. That's how they grow confidence. It's not because somebody affirms them and says, great job. It's because they can affirm themselves because of the clarity that the coach has given them about what they want them to do.
All right. Well, first off, I see your hair's on fire. Secondly, I love this rabbit hole we're going down here because I'm very passionate about checking for understanding of like just because you taught something doesn't mean it was actually learned.
Right.
And we need to find out, did they actually understand? And I think you framed it as like player feedback. And it's not like player feedback, like, did you like this? Did you not like this? It's more so of like, okay, where did maybe you didn't pick up the complete message or confirming the fact that yes, everything's good and we are ready to roll. And I know like there's this idea of like efficiency and ice time is expensive, but I would say take an extra 30 seconds to where did I lose you? What's unclear is a good use of time because now we're going to get the activity more correct. We're gonna have to spend less time correcting that and more time spending on the details within the activity of like, okay, that was better. Here, try this. You know, the John Wooden 2 to 20 second feedback loops for the players, and all of the things that come with having a better understanding of where your players are at and their current understanding.
Yeah, and scientifically, if you look at peak performance, what's the fastest way to help a player improve in some area? The research that was done by Anders Ericsson on this in a book called Peak. And what he figured out is that you need to have a 3 to 5% gap in challenge and skill when you're producing drills. There should be a 3 to 5% gap in the player's skill set and the ability to do what you're asking them to do. And it should be just challenging enough to activate their engagement, but not so challenging that it frustrates them. And I think a lot of coaches um, don't explain their player development philosophy to their team. And so when they're given drills that are naturally inventive to have them struggle, they think their coach is trying to reduce and challenge their confidence when really what the coach is trying to do is to improve their competence and the player now instead of being feeling like they failed, they understand their coach is trying to make them better and that's why they're doing things that they can't do right now. And I think every coach should go, hey team, I want you to know that today's practice, it's not your job to prove that you are good today in practice. It's your job to struggle today. This is the intent of this practice, is we're all going to struggle. No one is going to feel successful today, and that's by design. And here's why we're doing it. Now players aren't going to get involved in a lot of negative self-talk because their coach told them the role of practice was to struggle. And and again, being clear, this is what we're trying to do today. This is how you can gauge your level of success today. Tomorrow it might be something different, but today it's this way. When I see coaches do a bunch of flow drills with no back checkers or no game type situation, I go, you might as well just throw away that time and give the money to charity because it's about as wasteful on the ice as you can possibly get.
You know what? I can agree. I literally wrote an entire piece around flow drills and how useless they are. So glad we're all in agreement here. Uh, So yeah, waste of time. I think yeah, why flow drills suck and why coaches should throw away their cones and on ice objects. Because you're exactly right. It's about time and space, and how do we create the confidence to be good in games, which is around someone trying to stop you or giving you pressure to solve. So yeah, flow
And
drills, dumb and wasteful.
how do we reduce frustration? We reduce frustration by like on a power play. You got a 2 minute. What is a power play? A power play is a 2 minute opportunity to create a 1 second chance. If you can create a great chance in 2 minutes to score, that's what you're trying to do on the power play. Well, what are you trying to do on the penalty kill? You got 2 minutes to try to deny a 1 second great chance. And that way, when the first 45 seconds of the power play doesn't work, you can help your players understand you got 2 minutes to do this. You don't have to do it in the first 30 seconds. You don't have to do it in the first 45 seconds. All you need is a 2 minute opportunity to create a 1 second great scoring chance. And most coaches would take that as a successful power play.
Yeah, we're creating momentum
Right.
at bare minimum. All right, well, I want to wrap this up because I know you and I could go on for a long time, and we can waste our entire day, which I'm not sure it's a waste. We could just, spend away our day in a great conversation. Just a quick fire, what's on the top of your head on this? Doesn't need to be long.
Okay.
What are the habits of excellence?
Um, that's a great question. I mean, I think that's different for a lot of people, but the similarity, I would say, uh, morning routines, journaling, time management, personal development, intentionality, I would say, are some of the habits. Being intentional about how you want to show up each day, uh, journaling about things that you might be struggling with or questions that you have that you're working out on paper. Um, a morning routine. I think most people's days and the way they live their life are set in the first 45 minutes of their day. And I would say the last thing is getting enough sleep every day.
The ultimate hack,
The
good
ultimate
amount of sleep.
good amount of sleep. Yep.
I've seen my wife's a physician, so I've seen the lack of sleep is very bad.
Very bad. And I try to help athletes. Sometimes you don't get a good night of sleep. It's not the end of the world. But over the course of time to develop good sleep hygiene, develop good sleep habits so that you get it more often than you don't.
Yeah, it's tough when you don't get the proper amount of sleep. Like it's the same thing as eating healthy, right? Like if you don't put good in and do the good basics of just, human functionality, the rest goes to the heck.
Right.
But I think the thing from what you mentioned here is just intentionality, like being intentional about how you respect your time with time management, how you think become a better thinker, whether it be through journaling or else. I'm a big fan of like what you talk about is what you become, and what you intake often leads to the output. So for me, like I love a good blog called Farnham Street. And it's all about how do we think better? How do we frame our thinking in a positive way? And just all the little good ins eventually lead to the good outs, and being intentional about what we're, how we're talking to ourselves, what we're consuming, how we're spending our time. I think that's stuck out through our conversation, through that habits of excellence. And the last thing I really have here is just more about kind of what we were talking about, but I want to make sure it's said rather than just in the background as a theme here, that what you and I are talking about isn't so much about therapy and trying to fix problems. It's about performance and trying to add on good things that allow us to have success, and however we define that.
Yeah, when you think about mental skill coaching, people always ask me, Shaun, what is the purpose of why should I develop mental skills? And I always tell people, I go, if you're on the pursuit and you're on the pathway to high performance, there are some normal experiences you're going to have. You're going to be discouraged at times. You're going to struggle. You're going to have challenges. You're going to be uncomfortable. The difference between a person with high level of mental skills and the one that isn't is the one that has high level mental skills navigates through those normalized things that are on the path to excellence more effectively than the person who doesn't have mental skills, faces the same types of challenges that you do. It's just they don't navigate them very well. And I think a lot of people have come to believe that, you know, some people just have bad luck in life. They face bad, tough situations. And Greg, you and I both know that if you want to be the best version of yourself and if you want to be anything at a high level, it's the pathway is hard. And so it's not hard for some and easy for others. It's hard for everybody. And the ones that have the tools to navigate it make it look a little bit easier because they have the tools.
Yeah, they look like they're walking on water sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, they just have an ability to, detach from things and focus on more productive things and not personalize things, especially during times of struggle and the perception of failure. They don't personalize it. They use it as fuel to grow and get better. And that's something that I guess what we're talking about is that can be learned. And nobody has that naturally. Everybody has to learn it. And some people are more committed to learning it, and other people think that it just happens because you get older. And it doesn't happen because you get older.
No, there's a difference between the elderly and the elders.
Yeah, that's exact. I love that. I love that language. That's really productive language. I think that's really clear too.
I've always personally been drawn to the elders of the tribe. So for
Hmm.
me, I'm trying to become more like them than the opposite. So yeah, there's the elderly and the elders. It's the way
There's
I
the
like to put it.
intelligent and then there's the wise. And I think
Yes.
I'd rather be in the group of the wise.
Yeah, same here. So again, Shaun, thanks so much for coming on. This is a fantastic episode. I'm excited for everyone to listen to this.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I hope we get to do it again sometime.
Oh, do not. Hey, this you're messing with too many good times here. You know, you want to leave this good, but I'm a fan of talking about how do we get better at just being human and being able to deal with our daily struggles because you know they're going to come up. You may not be able to predict them, but you are able to prepare for them.
Agreed. So anything I can do to support and serve what you're doing, Greg, just let me know.
Thanks, Shaun.
Yeah.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.